from the heart of where innovation, money, and power collide in Silicon Valley and beyond. This is Bloomberg Technology with Emily Chang.
I'm Emily Chang in San Francisco, and this is Bloomberg Technology. Coming up in the next hour, antitrust reforms introduced by a group of House lawmakers includes going after big tech mega mergers. We'll hear from one of those lawmakers, Representative Victoria Spartz of Indiana. Plus, both sides of the crypto coin, the future of regulation with SEC Commissioner Hester Peirce, and on the investment side, we've got Michael Sonnenschein of the crypto asset firm Grayscale. And stick with streaming. Disney moves its highly anticipated documentary about the Beatles from theaters to its streaming service in a sign Hollywood is still unsure if moviegoers will return to theaters. All those stories in a moment, but first a check of the markets, including the tech-heavy NASDAQ. Our Kriti Gupta is here with that.
Well, Emily, a risk-off day in the stock market, and that's actually good news for tech, which is really where you saw the NASDAQ outperform. So you can really see that massive surge higher than before we went into that Fed meeting yesterday that, of course, rocked the markets. But this isn't just today's story. You are seeing this on a weekly basis as well. Tech is really outperforming. Really crucial to start seeing that even after kind of underperforming for the first 5 months of the year, June has really let it hit its stride again. You're seeing those first 2 weeks of June really do well for those big tech sectors, and especially this week, it has accelerated. I do want to bring to your attention, though, with that defensive bid, you are seeing treasuries higher as well. So that correlation between stocks and bonds now in positive territory. Really interesting to see that as we start to see that defensive bid, bonds back in focus. And of course, tech is really taking their cue from that, now trading in tandem rather than in opposite directions. Ed, what are you watching?
Well, right now I'm watching meme stocks. You see AMC Entertainment, another volatile day, up 10%. Other Reddit favorites like GameStop, a little actually more muted in its gains, up 0.3%. And BlackBerry, how has BlackBerry become a Reddit stock? I remember when I first arrived in San Francisco, BlackBerry being an old school, old-fashioned tech company, up by almost 5%. Why? Who knows? Of course, we know that this is retail traders driving a lot of this narrative, a lot of it to do with meme stocks. But one theory put forward by a guest on Bloomberg television today, Bank of America Securities, Jill Kerry, says, you're still seeing the rise of the retail trader and perhaps they're here to stay. Let's change the boards to big tech. Mega cap tech stocks on the rise on Thursday. No real reason or rhyme, no news flow, but we have seen rotation out of cyclicals, as you said, Kriti, and this reflation trade falling away. And you see names like Amazon, Apple, really making significant gains. Apple up 1.3%. Astonishingly, Apple is still actually in negative territory year to date. Final change on the board I want to see is some news-driven moves. Nvidia giving a street high by Jefferies of $854. They recently hosted the company's CFO, and clearly they like what they heard because they've raised their price target on that stock. That dragged AMD higher, and also Peloton higher by 3.5%. Mark Zuckerberg, the Facebook CEO, saying that Oculus, the VR headset, has a big future, and name-checked Peloton and fitness in that scope. Final thing I want to bring you, the SEC, Securities and Exchange Commission here in the US, issued a statement after market close saying it will be closed for Juneteenth on Friday, and the Federal Reserve Board in Washington has followed suit in the last few minutes. Emily, breaking news, they too will be closed to observe the Juneteenth holiday. Emily.
Breaking indeed. All right, Ed Ludlow, Kriti Gupta, thanks so much for the roundup there. Moving on to big tech antitrust, which has been top of mind in Washington this week between various hearings and a new package of bills being pushed by Representative David Cicilline. Joining me now to discuss one of those bills is Republican Representative Victoria Spartz of Indiana, who's sponsoring the Merger Filing Fee Modernization Act with Representative Joe Neguse, which updates filing fees for mergers for the first time in 2 decades to ensure that Department of Justice and FTC officials have the resources they need to aggressively enforce antitrust laws, or so they say. Congresswoman Spartz, thank you so much for joining us. What do you hope this bill will accomplish?
Well, I would like to first kind of stipulate, and I should really appreciate that we don't have just one omnibus bill with a lot of information in there where you kind of hate some, love some, and can never really decide what is the best vote to take, and you look how material, is it material good or bad? So I appreciate that this committee is filing 6 separate bills, and we can have six separate issues to debate. So I actually personally, still will stay open-minded, but I do not like a lot of provisions in other 5 bills. But the bill that I am working on is the bill actually that was passed by the Senate, and it was unanimously passed in the Senate Judiciary. I decided to be a lead sponsor on that bill because I believe the bill needs some work. And if we provide more resources to FTC to do a better job, really to dealing with bad apples and have it more user fee versus taxpayers funded, we also need to require more transparency and accountability from the FTC because they have been in a lot of, under different administration not doing their job very well. They have to be accountable to Congress. And I'm planning to make some amendments on Wednesday.
So had this bill existed, Congresswoman, how might the Facebook, Instagram, or Facebook, WhatsApp acquisitions have been different?
Well, I think, you have to actually, FTC, there is a function of FTC to review the merger. And actually, if you look at my bill, it doesn't just deal with big tech or particularly target any companies. It can apply to hospital monopolies, PBM monopolies. We have plenty of monopoly problem out there. But they have to start looking. Is some of the things created, concentrations of market allowed to have exercise monopoly powers? Are any of the players are exercising monopoly powers? And how we can have more effective tools of FTC dealing with that, because nothing wrong with M&As and large companies. It's when they start using monopoly power to suppress consumer. Or is it fair that the companies, there is no protection of people's rights of information and privacy protection? Should they have this crazy terms of service that no one knows what data they collect about you, how they deal with the data, what are they doing? Is this really outrageous? So we have to have discussion and debate, but FTC can be useful or not.
Lina Khan has just been appointed to chair the FTC. She's been a vocal critic of big tech. What's your take on her appointment?
Well, I think, there are a lot of concerns from the Republican side, the way that she will be aggressively enforcing it. I personally think FTC shouldn't be aggressively enforcing. FTC should do its job to actually not pick losers and winners, but see where aggressive monopoly powers have to be checked against the little guy and consumer, and when they're using these monopoly powers. So I think that's why it's important not just give funding to FTC, but actually have more transparency, accountability to Congress. And we need to have this discussion. And my Republican colleagues have legitimate concerns because they feel maybe there is, that she will be very aggressive and unfair. But if we don't get involved with this process, she's going to do it anyway. So I feel if we engage and have the deliberation and debate, that we can make better legislation.
Now, Republicans and Democrats both seem to want action on big tech, but for very different reasons. Democrats want more moderation. Republicans are worried about infringement on free speech. Where do you think you can actually find common ground? And will you find common ground in order for there to be some movement?
Well, we have to, right? Because if we don't find common ground, nothing is going to happen, and we have some problems. If we have a technology companies be able to silence the president of the United States, it's a huge problem. It's a big power. If we have, hospital monopolies dictating the prices and hyperinflation of price we have in the country, it's a huge problem. And a lot of them are created by us government, created barriers of entry. But we need to have a discussion and functional FTC to have as a mechanism, and maybe for a different reason, we need to find some common ground to move forward, because if we don't deliberate, we're going to have a status quo. Nothing is going to change. And I think it's hurting the consumer. It's hurting the free enterprise. It's hurting the markets. Monopoly powers are not good, especially if they're abused, and as a country of free enterprise, it hurts the small businesses. We see that. I used to work with Fortune 500 America, and I understand the importance to have a healthy markets, a healthy M&A, transactions, but a lot of them are getting less and less healthy, and FTC is not doing a job.
Right. Now, looking at big tech, I'd love to hear some specifics. If you think about companies as big as Apple and Google and Amazon, Facebook, Microsoft, which of those companies or where do you see the best case for a possible breakup? Or is that not what you're looking for?
No, I'm not looking, some of my colleagues looking to break up and everything else. I honestly think bottom-up approach is much better. than top-down. I mean, top-down approach can work, and if that's something, FTC should really make a case that, that needs to happen, because that would be the last resort. There are a lot of things in bottom-up approach where you can have portability of data, when you can have data protection, where you actually can let, these large players start playing by fair rules, because a lot of them suppressing the market and competition and little guy, so I think that will naturally allow more competition and naturally will evolve in more competitive market. That is my personal perspective. That's why I want to make sure that FCC is accountable and explain us what they're doing. So my bill is not looking. There are some other bills that believe in that approach. I would like to hear that debate. I personally not sold on that. I think bottom-up approaches work better than top-down.
So can you give us any more indication of the bills you're intending to introduce next week over FTC regulation?
Yes. There are 6 bills, and they deal a little bit different in a different ways. With some of them deal with data portability. Some of them actually look at the burden of proof related to merger and acquisitions. There are a variety of bills. I don't want to get into details. All of them will be debating them. And there are legitimate concerns. I personally said I have strong concerns with the rest of the bills, including even the bills that I'm introducing. I want to improve it too. Otherwise, if I don't, it's going to be passed like it is because it's passed in the Senate. But there are some good parts of, data portability. There are the other parts of the bill that I don't particularly like, in the interoperability of data. But I think portability is a good piece. But it's also, I don't like that it just applies to few companies. It should apply to everyone. We shouldn't just select few, criteria. It should apply to be constitutional. I truly believe that laws should apply to everyone.
All right. Republican Representative Victoria Spartz of Indiana, thanks so much for joining us to share your point of view. We'll be watching for those bills next week. Coming up, the SEC has delayed a ruling on Bitcoin ETFs, but when it comes down to it, what will it be? And could other countries adopt crypto like El Salvador? We're going to have a guest weigh in on that next. This is Bloomberg. Bitcoin's had a wild few months since reaching its high back in April, but the coin has gotten a boost in recent days, up just over 3% this week on the back of Elon Musk tweeting that Tesla could potentially resume accepting Bitcoin as long as miners who verify transactions do so more sustainably. Also adding to the price jump, El Salvador adopting Bitcoin as a form of currency for the country and pointing to a small village where they've been accepting it for years. Earlier, Bloomberg spoke with the CEO of the crypto lending firm Nexo, Anthony Trenchev. Take a listen.
El Salvador is a small country and it has some little bit of troubles here and there, and it was a great PR move. 20% of their economy comes through remittances, so for them that makes sense. I see some of the Latin countries following up sooner rather than later. Is the US going to follow suit? I doubt that.
Want to bring in the CEO of the crypto investment firm Grayscale Investments, Michael Sonnenschein. Michael, do you doubt that the U.S. Will make a similar move? What's your take?
Well, I think what we've really seen now is quite a few projects underway, both in the U.S. and abroad, where central banks are beginning to explore the development of their own digital currencies. So we've seen that in places like China. We've seen the development of the digital dollar project beginning to get some traction here in the US. But ultimately, this is not necessarily something that should be construed or understood to be a competitor with decentralized protocols like Bitcoin, but rather I do see in the future that we will see sovereign currencies, fiat currencies, make the move onto a blockchain-based system.
So how is this uncertainty impacting where you're placing your bets? I mean, do you have any plans to pitch a tent on Bitcoin Beach in El Salvador anytime soon?
I think this has been a really interesting time in the market. Seeing moves like what we're seeing in El Salvador, seeing an environment where we have some of the world's most followed, most famous investors publicly coming out in support of Bitcoin, seeing, major corporations begin to add Bitcoin to their balance sheets. This is an environment unlike we've ever seen before around this asset class. And I certainly think the last 18 plus months for many people in the investment community have really solidified the staying power that digital currencies now have, and investors are now waking up to the potential that they can provide to their portfolios.
Now, I just spoke with Coinbase co-founder Fred Ursum of the crypto venture capital firm Paradigm, who's legitimately concerned that China will surpass the US in crypto, and especially when it comes to regulation. What do you think?
Well, I think what we're seeing here in the US is a regulatory regime that has been very in tune with cryptocurrency. And, certainly firms like Grayscale are a really strong example of a firm that's working within the asset class, but also within the existing regulatory framework. And what you're seeing is now guidance that has really given investors the confidence they need to approach and be involved in the asset class, whether it's SEC, CFTC, IRS, Treasury, FinCEN, you name it. And what we have seen in other parts of the world, like China, is a stance that I think is a little bit more prohibitive at times around decentralized currencies like Bitcoin. So, to Fred's point, and I do sometimes agree with that stance, that there is a little bit of, perhaps an arms race around this as to which countries and which regulatory regimes are going to be most accommodative to the innovation that's taking place around these types of assets, and ensuring that the companies and the people that are using them, kind of get that first mover advantage. So there is some element of time being of the essence around some of those initiatives.
Well, and speaking of that, we're expecting an SEC decision in the near future on Bitcoin ETFs. That decision was expected this week. It was pushed. Where do you expect that decision to land?
Well, we've been engaged with the SEC on Bitcoin ETFs dating all the way back to 2016. We are 100% committed to converting our flagship fund, Grayscale Bitcoin Trust, into an ETF when the regulatory environment is ready to make those kinds of approvals. And from our engagement with regulators and our seat within the financial services and crypto communities, we're really encouraged by a lot of the progress that's being made. But I think the SEC has been very, very clear that there are certain aspects of the crypto ecosystem that they're looking to achieve a certain level of maturation. And so they're trying to ensure that these markets, and inherently before they approve products around them, are void of manipulation, have surveillance sharing agreements in place in the spot market, and ultimately may have some of the same types of investor protections in place that they may have around equities and other asset classes that they also oversee. So while we're certainly making progress, I think clearly we're not quite there just yet.
Now, obviously, there's been a ton of volatility. Are we back on the upswing, or are we going to see some more lows before we get back to a high up cycle?
Well, I think based on investor demand, we've seen this time and again. We've seen either leverage coming out of the ecosystem that's caused a correction in the price of Bitcoin, or other news or other events affecting the price of Bitcoin. But typically the investor behavior has been one of using these pullbacks in price opportunistically to add to their positions, right? If they fundamentally still believe in the same investment thesis, but that investment is now available to them at 10 or maybe 15% cheaper than it was a week or two or a month ago, then investors often use these types of periods of time to really add to those positions and ultimately build a diversified portfolio, when you see those pullbacks.
What do you think of Elon Musk's latest comments? I mean, does the whiplash bother you, saying one thing then saying another?
Well, you're talking to someone that's been around crypto for about 8 years now, and so I've seen no shortage of movements in the crypto price. But I do think some of the commentary that Elon Musk has made has really been focused on ESG and some of the carbon footprint and energy consumption concerns around Bitcoin mining. And I think when it comes to that, it's really important that we stick to the facts. I think the latest statistic is about 75% of miners are using renewable energy as part of their energy mix. So that could be hydro, that could be wind, it could be solar. And it's important to zoom out a little bit, Emily, and realize we're only 10 or 12 years into the life cycle of crypto assets. And so it definitely stands to reason that this is an opportunity for this industry to continue to innovate, continue to reduce its carbon footprint, and ultimately kind of rise to the challenge that's being presented to it.
I'm sure over all these years you've developed the iron stomach to weather these ups and downs. Michael Sonnenschein, Grayscale Investment CEO. Thanks so much, Michael, for taking the time to join us. All right, coming up, Facebook launches new tools to help businesses reach more customers. But is the social network muscling in on Amazon's e-commerce turf? We'll find out next. And Adobe out with second quarter earnings after the bell. The company giving a profit forecast for the current quarter that topped analyst estimates as more customers subscribe to its software packages. A story will continue to follow. This is Bloomberg.
I don't think we're making a dent in Amazon yet. We partner with a lot more of the ecosystem. So we have a close partnership with Shopify, who also builds great tools to support businesses in growing on the internet. We've partnered with a lot of other companies like that. Our approach here has been to try to be pretty open and partnership oriented. We're not going to build all of the tools that businesses need in order to grow and sell online, but we build some really good ones where a lot of businesses can drive a lot of sales through our ad products. And if we can extend that by now enabling purchases and browsing directly, that would be great. But we're going to do that in partnership with a lot of companies.
Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg there speaking at the Viva Tech conference about the social network's e-commerce plans. His comments came as the company introduced ads to its Instagram Reels product to help businesses reach wider audiences. In other news, ByteDance, the company behind TikTok, announced a $2.1 billion operating loss last year. That compares to a operating profit of $684 million in 2019. The swing coming after the company issued more shares to employees ahead of a widely anticipated IPO. It also boosted spending to acquire users and support content creators. And a number of websites operated by financial institutions, governments, and airlines went down briefly Thursday in the second global internet outage in as many weeks. Among those affected, Hong Kong exchanges and clearing, a number of Australian banks, and Southwest Airlines. Some of the outages were linked to a failure at Akamai Technologies. The issue recalled an hour-long outage earlier this month, which was triggered by a software failure at the content delivery platform, Fastly. And coming up, 23andMe debuts through a merger with a SPAC sponsored by Richard Branson. My conversation with 23andMe CEO Ann Wojcicki is next. This is Bloomberg. Welcome back to Bloomberg Technology. I'm Emily Chang in San Francisco. Let's get back to financial markets, where our Ed Ludlow is keeping an eye on the SPAC market. Ed, they've slowed a bit, but they're still coming. What are you seeing?
They're still coming. Look at the basket of companies that did go public through a special purpose acquisition company or SPAC. 23andMe, story of the day, surging 21% on its debut as a public company. Of course, as you said, went public via a reverse merger with a Richard Branson SPAC, VG Acquisition Corp. But if you follow the space, there's some big moves. Nikola Corp, the hydrogen semi-maker, up almost 8%. SoFi Tech, the fintech company, up 4%. But as you know, Emily, I like to look at the bigger picture. So come with me into my Bloomberg terminal and look at this chart. And let's focus in on the white line down the bottom there. That white line is an index of companies that went public through a reverse merger with a SPAC. They now trade as themselves. And as you can see, that white line is trailing, underperforming the blue line. Well, that blue line is a gauge of all of the SPACs that are yet to acquire a company. So there's a lesson here. It does not guarantee performance taking this route to go public through a reverse merger with a SPAC. If you come back to me in the studio as well, some of the year-to-date performance is worth noting. You see Nikola Corp up just marginally year-to-date. DraftKings, marginal gains. Lordstown Motors down significantly year to date. What do all three of these companies have in common? They were subject to a short seller attack by Hindenburg Research. Of course, as a short seller, they profit if the stocks drop. But what's interesting, as a SPAC, you can market future financial projections. It's very different to listing through the traditional IPO route. But it means that sometimes people come digging. And if look at those SPACs year to date, it's a really choppy road. I'm going to keep an eye on 23andMe. Emily.
All right, choppy indeed. Bloomberg's Ed Ludlow. Thank you. Meantime, as Ed mentioned, the genetic testing and personalized medicine company 23andMe began trading on the NASDAQ. It went public through a merger with the Richard Branson SPAC. Shares up over 21% from the opening price. Earlier, I caught up with Ann Wojcicki, 23andMe CEO and founder, who once told me she never wanted to be a public company. I asked, why now?
I'm a firm believer that companies should not go public until the time is right for them and until they're mature enough to handle it. It's a lot of pressure. As you know, I mean, you're on TV every day and people are watching your ticker and your price. So you want to be public when you are mature enough of a company to really manage that. And 23andMe is absolutely at that stage. And we're also at a point where there's just an incredible opportunity on the consumer side of the business and on the therapeutic side of the business. And we absolutely want to be able to scale.
Now, I know part of the ambition here is to raise cash to double down on the therapeutic side of the business. You recently licensed your first drug that was developed in-house to another company. How many more drugs could we see and when?
Well, we have a large collaboration. We have a collaboration with GSK focusing on really looking at all of the genetic information and looking at genetic insights and can we turn those insights into therapeutics. So we have over 40 programs underway with them. And our first one is in human clinical trials. And we're excited that we'll have, hopefully another one in humans soon.
I want to talk about the DNA testing part of the company, which is how 23andMe was born. You did have some layoffs through the pandemic. I know that the business has slowed. Ancestry, for example, has taken their testing kit off the market. There have been privacy concerns there as well. Will those continue to be a challenge? And how does the DNA testing fit into the future vision for the business?
All great questions. I think what is really clear is that people understand the idea of DNA and a personalized experience happening in your healthcare, but we don't yet have that experience. And I think people are largely frustrated with the healthcare, how it is. And I think there's an opportunity for us to do much better in the whole world of personalized prevention, as well as a more personalized treatment. So that is really a lot of where we are focused now. What's been interesting in the market, as you've seen, and as you alluded to with the ups and downs, is that people yet don't know exactly what do you do? How is healthcare and genetics integrated? So that is something that 23andMe is really pioneering and trying to explain more and more to our customers. What actually should they do with the genetic information and how do they integrate that into their life and into their care? Last, with respect to privacy and everything going on, 23andMe has always said that there's a huge opportunity to actually engage individuals more with their health and in research if you treat them more like a partner and not like a human subject. And that means if you actually provide them choice and transparency. So what 23andMe does, we don't ever opt our customers automatically into anything. We give them a choice to opt in. We're very transparent about the research that we're doing. We gave people the opportunity to opt out, actually, even when we have done large pharma partnerships. And we've always found that people, when they have this opportunity to have a choice, they want to participate.
Now, as we've been talking, and I've been watching the stock price, it was 19% above list. Now it's down to about 17% above list. We've been talking about a SPAC bubble, and if that bubble has burst. Curious why you thought a SPAC was the right call versus a traditional IPO when you are more likely, perhaps, to get that typical tech IPO pop.
I was really happy with the opportunity to work with Richard Branson and his team. And frankly, we looked at the IPO process, we looked at the SPAC process, and I think the opportunity to work with them to really engage with investors more was just an opportunity we wanted to pursue. So I'm really thrilled. Richard Branson is one of the few incredibly successful entrepreneurs that understands healthcare, understands the consumer side, understands why it's so hard. And I think he's going to be a great partner for us going forward.
So paint the 5-year picture. We've got just about a minute left. What does the company look like? Will there be new products? Will there be new features? What looks different 5 years from now?
I think there's two things that we're really focused on. One is truly helping our 11 million plus customers and growing, helping them have a personalized healthcare experience that is based on their genetics. Very few physicians are trained on how to integrate genetic information into care. And that is specifically an opportunity for 23andMe to help all of our customers integrate genetic medicine into their primary care experience. Second, we're absolutely going to run fast and furious with all the opportunities that we see on the therapeutic side. And we're going to, in turn, help our customers benefit by really being able to give them a genetically derived treatment that came from the 23andMe community.
And quickly, as we come out of the pandemic, obviously, you've done some really interesting COVID research linking genetics to blood type, to the loss of taste and smell. Is there more? Are we going to see more discoveries, more that you unearth on COVID in particular?
We are talking about doing more research on long COVID. And I think that's a perfect example where 23andMe, because we have this ongoing engagement platform, we can engage our customers by putting out a survey to them and get them, filling out more information and being able to do the analysis on that.
Anne Wojcicki there, CEO and founder of 23andMe. Coming up, my conversation with SEC Commissioner Hester Peirce about the future of regulation for crypto. She's generally known as someone who's been more favorable to crypto policy. That is next. This is Bloomberg.
It's really hard to price things in dollars. We just don't know where the dollar is going to go, really. I'm super bullish on Bitcoin. I think $200,000 a coin by the end of the year is still within reach. I've said one Bitcoin, one Lambo by the end of the year. It may be a Lambo with a fewer options or a smaller engine at this point, but I think we're still looking at very lofty price targets here, and I think we'll see a new all-time high before the end of the year.
Kraken CEO Jesse Powell there on his price target for Bitcoin, using his favorite comparison. He also responded to a question on Elon Musk's concerns about the environmental impact of cryptocurrencies.
I think Bitcoin is a lot greener than people give it credit for. It is a way to capture a lot of discarded and lost energy. It's a way to bootstrap renewables. So I think it's doing a lot actually for the renewable energy sector. And, I don't know how long Elon has been studying this, but, I think he's got some more studying to do on this topic.
After that interview aired earlier on Bloomberg, Elon Musk responded on Twitter saying, based on what data? Meantime, everybody is waiting for the SEC to make a move on cryptocurrency, and how Chair Gary Gensler will lead that effort remains a big question. I spoke with SEC Commissioner Hester Peirce, known for her more favorable position on crypto. Take a listen.
Well, it's a little too early for me to tell you what to expect in terms of what our new chairman is planning to do on crypto. He has been quite outspoken already about wanting to have some oversight of the spot markets, whether that's the SEC or another federal regulatory agency. But with respect to what we're going to do at the SEC, I hope that we can provide clarity in a few different areas. One would be, I've put out a token safe harbor to give some clarity around token distribution events. I think we need to approve an exchange traded product based on Bitcoin, and frankly, we've gotten new applications in on based on ETH as well. And then we need to provide some clarity around custody for regulated entities, so for broker dealers and investment advisors. So those are some of the areas I'd like us to take action in.
Now, the SEC filed a lawsuit in December against Ripple Labs, creator of the XRP token. And and the claim is that that XRP is an unregistered security. Why did this happen now?
Well, I can't speak to any litigation that's ongoing, but I can say that we have been bringing enforcement actions now in this space since 2017. I anticipate that as long as there's activity in this space, there will be enforcement in this space. But that said, I've been very clear about the fact that I think we need to provide regulatory clarity before we spend too much more time on enforcement where there's not fraud involved.
So that leads to the question, XRP has been on the market for 8 years. When does a digital asset become a security or maybe something else? And how does the SEC determine that?
Well, I think that is a difficult question. And it's something that I've also, again, tried to get us to be a little bit more precise. When we think about a crypto asset, a digital asset as being a security, what we're doing is we're saying that we think it's being sold as part of an investment contract, which means that there are promises being made around the sale of that asset. It doesn't mean that the asset itself necessarily has to be a security. It means that it was being sold as a security. Then the question becomes, at what point can someone sell that asset not as a security? And that is a very difficult line.
When it comes to Elon Musk in particular, though, do you find it at all problematic that one person whose company owns a lot of cryptocurrency, in this case Bitcoin, can have such tremendous power over the market? Is there a problem with that?
Again, my focus as a securities regulator is to try to regulate the securities markets in a way that protects investors and protects the integrity of that marketplace. I always encourage people to make their own decisions, regardless of what anyone, whether it's a celebrity or whether it's their brother or their mother, tells them about a security or an asset of any kind. Make your own decision, do your own analysis. And if you're not able to do that, then go to a financial professional or another professional if it's a non-financial asset. Go and get the help you need to make the decision and to do so wisely.
What do you think the odds are for a central bank digital currency?
Well, certainly there will be a CBDC, whether or not from the U.S. I'm not the one to answer that question. The Fed has said that they're thinking about it, and so I expect we'll see the fruits of that thought as they try to engage with the public on it. Other central banks are coming up with CBDCs, and I think it's a natural progression of money that we'll see people moving into CBDCs. Now, there are a lot of questions around them. There are questions around privacy. There are questions around whether people will feel comfortable using a CBDC or would prefer to use private stablecoins. And those are questions that certainly in the United States we're going to have to wrestle with because we really do care about financial privacy.
What about what's happening in other countries? When you look at China, does China have too much influence on cryptocurrency markets?
I think one of the benefits of crypto is that it allows people all over the world to participate. And crypto markets are very diverse. And so the level of participation by different people in different countries varies a lot, I think, across different crypto assets. So you kind of need to think about it in that way. But another piece of this that I would bear in mind is that crypto activity can move very easily. It's much harder for any particular country or particular group of people in any particular country to retain control over any particular decentralized system, as long as it really is decentralized.
Does it mean that crypto could be a real systemic risk to the traditional financial world?
The traditional financial world has obviously brought society really important benefits. And I think as we see crypto mature, it's going to open more doors to more people to participate with the financial system. And that's a good thing. That's something that we should encourage, right? And so Do we have to watch out for risks? That's what regulators do all the time. We're going to be watching for risks no matter whether they come from the traditional financial system, whether they come from the decentralized financial system, or whether they come from some combination of the two. But I think these concerns that there's something inherent about crypto that should have us scared from a systemic perspective are overblown.
SEC Commissioner Hester Pierce there on cryptocurrency. Of course, we'll be looking at how the SEC weighs in on crypto in coming weeks. Coming up, Disney is taking a U-turn with its highly anticipated Beatles documentary, why the company is holding off on theaters and taking it straight to streaming. That's next. This is Bloomberg.
Two, 1, 0. Ignition and liftoff. Go Falcon, go GPS.
Another successful launch and landing for a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket on board a new GPS navigation satellite for the U.S. military. This is the first time SpaceX has launched a national security mission with a reused rocket. Meantime, Hollywood isn't quite sure movie theaters want to get back to that in-theater experience. So much so that Disney is moving its highly anticipated documentary about the Beatles from theaters to its streaming service. Bloomberg's Chris Palmieri has all the details. Chris, this is a big one. Why do you think they did this?
Well, there's a couple things going on. One is that, it's pretty clear, there's been a lot of stories about movie theaters coming back. If it's a movie like Godzilla, Quiet Place, a horror movie, that it attracts that kind of core movie-going audience, 18 to 30-year-olds who, maybe trying to get out of the house, feel like, they're a little invulnerable, and they're going out to see movies in theaters. But the older folks like me, still very skittish, even if you're vaccinated, to get in a room with a bunch of strangers. And I think that's probably part of the calculus here. The Beatles movie, to convince a guy like Peter Jackson, the Lord of the Rings director who did this, to take his movie out of theaters, that took a lot of work. But they're just figuring that Beatles fans are going to feel more comfortable. And the other interesting thing here is that they put it on Disney Plus, not Hulu, no extra charge. They're really, as you know, Emily, how Disney Plus is important to this company. And to put it on Thanksgiving weekend, they're really trying to, make a statement and have everybody talking about it.
Well, that's what I was going to ask, because it was supposed to come out in theaters in August. Why not put it on streaming in August?
Well, they was originally supposed to come out last year, so you can ask, why August? It just has to do with competition and schedules. Thanksgiving is actually kind of a time when Disney's released some of its, bigger movies. Frozen came out then. But, given the lag that they've had, with not being able to produce any movies last year, they've got a problem with content, so they've got to fill these sort of windows, whether it's in theaters or on TV or on streaming, with these, sort of big event things that get people talking.
So what are the other big pictures that Disney has coming up for the rest of the year? Because if you look at what's happening in theaters right now, it's certainly interesting, and it does certainly seem that only a certain kind of audience is going back.
Right. I mean, we're going to see, it's not a traditional year. The box office is still down 50%, even from last year's numbers, which in last year's obviously was, taking a big hit. And so, we're going to see movies. F9, the Fast and the Furious sequel is coming out. That's a Universal picture, but that'll be later this month. That's going to do very well, I'm sure. Disney has Black Widow coming out in theaters, the Marvel movie. That's going to do very well. I mean, again, it's that core audience of younger people who are feeling a lot more comfortable going out and spending time with their friends and sort of looking for events like that. And, these more adult-oriented films are probably going to keep getting pushed out.
Meantime, looking at the bigger Disney empire, are we seeing a rebound at the parks? Vax summer, if you will. Obviously, masks off, states reopening, California reopening is a big deal for Disneyland.
Oh, yeah. I mean, they just opened this Avengers campus at California Adventure, and they did it, as we wrote about, without the usual big, huge publicity push like you saw for Cars Land or for Star Wars Land. And it still, had lines, even with this virtual queue system that they started. People were up, trying to get there early to get a reservation. The park itself, you need a reservation to get into. It's sold out on a lot of days. And things are busy in Florida as well. So, it's not quite the good old days, but it's certainly, people are looking to get out and get those experiences.
All right, Bloomberg's Chris Palmieri will keep watching how this evolves. Thanks for bringing that story to us. And that does it for this edition of Bloomberg Technology. Tune in tomorrow. We're going to be joined by Hadia Mugeed, the founder and CEO of HBCU VC. This is a group that helps direct capital to Black and Latinx innovators, a really fascinating approach to a difficult problem. You don't want to miss that. I'm Emily Chang in San Francisco. This is Bloomberg.